What's up everyone, it's ENDYMION, and there is a lot of stuff happening, from a sweet baby disaster coming true, just like myself and others said it would, and since the explosive news of Xbox closing all of their studios a few days ago, things are allegedly nowhere near ending and will get worse. And the continued destruction of Xbox as a brand will have much more bad news on the way if what I'm reading here is to be believed. Also, a Warhammer artist says anyone who disagrees with the industry should be killed and hung up, and there's some Helldivers news too. Let's start with the sweet baby news first. Like I said, from the moment it was announced Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League was going to be a disaster for the brand and Warner Bros. No matter what. And according to many sites, Squad has lost over $200 million for Warner Bros., which has now put the company in a really bad position going forward when it comes to their gaming division. The chief financial officer for Warner Bros., whose name is Gunnar Wedenfall, said Squad has basically turned their 2024 into a bloodbath of misfires and panic. The game's losses are reeling throughout the entire company, and this does not bode well for the future of Rocksteady as a studio. I wouldn't be surprised if Rocksteady gets thrown into oblivion by Warner and the entire studio is just laid off and dismantled, but that's starting to very likely become the reality for that studio. I would say that I'm sad about it, but unfortunately, this was always going to happen regardless. Most of the old guard had left the studio already to go work with the founder of Rocksteady at his new development studio. So the people who made the beloved Batman Arkham games weren't even really there to make Suicide Squad anyways. Factor in that they made a cutscene heavy game that was also a live service, and already none of it made any sense. Live service games cater to a very specific kind of player, and those players don't want control taken away from them constantly in order to watch cutscenes. Yet that's exactly what Squad does. The entire thing was a mess from the beginning. None of it made any sense. It's very likely that Squad will kill Rocksteady at this point. All the DLC that has been made will probably just get sharded out, and a bare-bones skeleton crew will maintain the game for the next year or so. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if come February next year, which would be 1 year since Squad release, that Rocksteady will be gone, the game will have all support pulled, and the game will largely just be abandoned by Warner Bros. The only thing I can see Warner doing before washing their hands clean of this mess is maybe just implementing a single player offline mode to the game, which may seem like a win for players, but in reality it's so the game can just be sold in the future to make some sort of return on investment, while also not having to maintain server costs to keep the online side of the game running, because it's making no money. I guarantee you within the year that Squad will be on PlayStation Plus and Game Pass. I wouldn't be remotely surprised if it happens even before its first year anniversary, because that's how abysmal it's been doing for Warner. Some may ask, how did this happen? But it's pretty simple really. Squad is the epitome of a diversity-hired woke creation made by people who weren't there during the studio's golden years. They're Rocksteady in name alone, hijacked and used to push an agenda. It's yet another stain upon the agenda of the Sweet Baby, and this will not be the last time it happens either. Sweet Baby has a knack for making posts on their LinkedIn whenever a studio they worked with folds, and they will always try to spin the failure of any given project into a win somehow. It's always, sure, we lost millions, reviewed low, and players hated our game, but at least we brought diversity to whatever failed project we damaged controlling for at the time. Squad happens to be not only a bad game, but easily one of the biggest Sweet Baby disasters so far in their entire history. For a consulting agency founded in 2018, they sure have ruined quite a lot in the past 6 years. And I'm sure they will double down in the future, but this failure will hopefully teach studios and publishers out there that the winds are indeed changing. Fans are fed up, they hate agenda-pushing nonsense in their entertainment, and while these companies can push this stuff all they want, they will pretty much get met with the same response always, which is failure, low scores, and empty wallets worth of income. I'm sure once Rocksteady eventually dies, you'll have journalists claim it's because fans are sexist, racist, and homophobic, or whatever other buzzwords they want to throw. But let it be said clearly that the reason why this failed and others who follow in its footsteps do is simple. They spat in the face of longtime fans, they ruined lore and story for agenda, and they successfully took yet another legacy franchise and ran that sucker into an early grave, all in the name of virtue signaling. It's like what Steve Jobs once said, which was that consulting agencies never have to face the consequences of their own choices. They just get paid, offer moronic advice that almost never works, and then they screw off into the sunset looking for the next ship to sink. And the people who paid way too much for some out-of-touch weirdo to tell them how to make their game end up having to pick up the pieces as everything blows up around them and their entire legacy just falls into the depths. We keep telling you guys to stop hiring these people, they will only bring ruin to your properties. The fact that future releases like Insomniac's Wolverine will absolutely be a Sweet Baby Project 2 is not a good sign at all. They likely think Wolverine will still sell on name alone, but if this push by the community can result in this sort of response when the Gamergate 2 crowd, as they call it, are able to assemble like this with Steam curator pages and so on, just imagine the cultural impact and power the Gamergate 2 will have in a year or two once Wolverine releases. I honestly would be surprised if Sweet Baby even exists in any capacity by that point. You have to be twisted in the head and a complete idiot to want to deliberately demand these people's services, or any other consulting firm, by the way. Look, I loved Rocksteady's games, but even I have to come to the sad conclusion that the Rocksteady I loved is gone. And what is currently wearing its corpse is just a pretender that needs to be left to rot and die. So, dear Warner Bros., don't ever hire Sweet Baby for anything or any other stupid consulting company in the future ever again. Unless you really love losing money, then sure, keep at it. Now, just a quick update on Helldivers 2 before we move on to the next big story. So when the whole PSN Helldivers 2 thing happened, one of the community managers named Spitz was pushing people to negatively review the game in order to send a message. And technically, what those negative reviews did ended up working because Sony reversed the changes. And Helldivers 2 was saved from pretty much not being able to be played by like 2/3 of the world. Anyway, now that community manager has been fired, which is kind of unfortunate considering what they did was done in order to save the game. And in all honesty, if anybody should have lost their job, it was the head community manager of Helldivers, who goes by Baskinator. They threw their own team under the bus and sacrificed them to save her own skin. She's the same community manager who said that Helldivers was always woke, which didn't go over well either. A short update here, but something I wanted to mention. Spitz getting fired, but Baskinator getting to stay is beyond stupid in my opinion, since Spitz actually at the very least had people's backs, whereas Baskinator did not. It's just an unfortunate overall situation. I hope Spitz lands on their feet since they stood by players when the main CM clearly didn't. I hope Spitz is okay, they didn't deserve that, and the fact that Baskinator is still there, man, talk about failing upwards, fellas. Now let's move on to the next big story here, which is of course Xbox. The short version, in case you don't know, Microsoft has closed down 4 game studios recently, with the studios behind games like Prey, Hi-Fi Rush, and Redfall getting axed, so all of those franchises are either dead or left in limbo now. But the news sadly doesn't end there. From Bloomberg, we have Jason Schreier, one of the only actual video game journalists left that actually does investigative reporting and, real journalism. I know, crazy, but there's actually still some real journalists left in this industry. Not everybody is like Kotaku's Alyssa Asylum Mercanti. Anyway, according to Jason, the Microsoft situation surrounding Xbox is nowhere near being done, and things will get worse according to what his sources have told him. In case you forgot, Microsoft bought ZeniMax, which owns Bethesda, for $7.5 billion back in 2020. And according to Jason's sources, Xbox is going to be cutting a lot more in the foreseeable future. One of his sources said when Tango Gameworks got closed, they were in the process of pitching another Hi-Fi Rush game, but that will obviously no longer happen. What's even more bizarre is Matt Booty, who's the head of Xbox, praised Hi-Fi Rush at a town meeting that happened a few days ago, yet wouldn't tell his own staff why Tango was shuttered to begin with. Which doesn't make any sense. How do you close the studio that made a game your company loves? Please, make it make sense. Beyond this, Matt Booty said that the other reason why all of these cuts are happening is because Xbox management is being spread far too thin, and they cannot reasonably allocate enough resources and time to properly oversee every single game studio and their individual needs properly. Apparently, Matt Booty said his management team was like peanut butter on bread, and there just wasn't enough peanut butter to cover every slice. This guy gets paid way too much money to be making peanut butter analogies when it comes to people's income and the livelihood of studios, but that's where we're at, I guess. But the reason, according to Booty, for the closures was to free up resources to be allocated into other studios more effectively. Jill Braff, who runs ZeniMax, also commented on all of this and said, It's hard to support 9 studios all across the world with a lean central team with an ever-growing plate of things to do. I think we were about to topple over. What's interesting is that a lot of these cuts are all coming 4 years following the insane growth the game industry saw during the pandemic, apologies. Whereas tons of publishers and studios staffed up like crazy due to everyone being stuck at home, and subsequently now a lot of these publishers are now purging their workplaces of the very same people they hired. Microsoft, back in February, laid off almost 2,000 people if you remember. Most of those, by the way, were from Activision Blizzard, which Microsoft also bought for an insane amount of money, $68.7 billion to be exact. But what really makes me confused is why would Microsoft go out of their way to buy all of these big studios only to then fire thousands of people so soon after? As Jason Schreier reports, it's because Microsoft massively underestimated how they were going to maintain and oversee all of the studios and games equally. Which, I don't know about you, but if you're one of the few trillion-dollar companies in the world spending over $70 billion buying up stuff like Bethesda and Activision Blizzard, don't you think you could hire some people with common sense before you spend that much money to figure out if you can maybe maintain this massive influx of employees, IP, and so on? It's like someone buying a house that's really expensive or even a car that they can't afford or take care of. Why are you buying something that you can't properly take care of anyways? Was it only to flex on your competition maybe? That's the only real reason I could see it happening. Apparently Microsoft thought buying stuff like Blizzard and such would make their Game Pass service explode in value and subscriptions, but that hasn't actually been the case. According to Matt Piscatella, an executive analyst, the growth of Game Pass has been horrible since these buyouts. So bad, in fact, that Game Pass has been growing in the single digits when it comes to overall audience growth recently. Xbox apparently spent the most money they ever had on acquiring games and such for Game Pass between late 2019 and early 2021. But since then, the acquisitions for Game Pass have severely dried up because clearly this is not working how they want it to. Nobody is really signing up for the long term when it comes to Xbox Game Pass, which of course means Microsoft is being less incentivized to actually keep investing heavily into the brand in the future. There was this one part of the article that just made me sigh really loud, which read, "While there's no indication that Xbox plans to ditch the Game Pass model, there are hints that its big bets have not paid off. During the most recent quarter, sales of Xbox content and services were up 62%. But as Nico Partners analyst Daniel Ahmad pointed out last month, the growth was entirely due to the acquisition of Activision Blizzard. On social media, he noted that without sales from that deal, Xbox gaming revenue would have been down approximately 5% year over year. With no software and services growth and sharp hardware revenue decline. Like, come on man, really? So it's clear as day that Xbox as a brand is having diminishing returns as time goes on. This article from tweaktown.com published back in 2023 stated that Microsoft hopes to get around 100 million subscribers by 2030. But as of 2024 so far, Xbox sits at just 34 million subscribers. Which is still obviously a lot of people, don't get me wrong, but they're not even halfway there yet and time is obviously ticking. And if anything, they're losing subscribers every year instead, and fans at Xbox are worried that Ninja Theory will be the next on the chopping block. Did you even know that Hellblade 2 comes to Game Pass in about a week and a half as of the making of this video? Not many did, because Microsoft is not promoting the game whatsoever, and it's a single-player cinematic game that likely costed them a lot of money to make. And I sincerely doubt it'll drive any sales for them either, which again doesn't really surprise me. And the likelihood that Ninja Theory bites the dust once their game is released is very likely to happen, but this is what happens to these games and their companies. You're releasing these games onto a dying subscription-based service where people can sign up for very little money. They play your games, they beat them, then they cancel their subscription and you get basically nothing for it. And what's worse, and I've been saying this for years, is that Game Pass has retroactively made Xbox worse as a platform as well in terms of revenue, because it has trained its player base to never buy games for actual money anymore. Just wait till it hits Game Pass and that's it. And I said that 2 years ago at this point, I think, that Game Pass goes against the idea of human innovation when it comes to video games and entertainment. Because there's zero incentive to make a game great because it doesn't matter because of the nature of how these games are released and funded. Why work your ass off and put your everything into a product if you know it'll just be shat out onto a service for someone to play? When you remove the real threat of failure out of the creative process, what you're left with is complacency. For example, if every video of mine always hit 1 million views no matter what, why would I bother with the quality if I was ensured every video would hit that amount regardless? I wouldn't. Instead, if you were guaranteed a fixed rate, you would just do the bare minimum to maintain the gravy train. There's no reason to go above and beyond or do anything that betters your content, because why bother if every video just hit 1 million regardless? But due to the nature of YouTube, or really just a free market that you and I exist and participate in, the potential high reward versus high losses is a tangible philosophy to live by. It encourages people to go out of their way to try things in order to gain great success. If there was no chance of achieving your dreams, why would you ever bother having them to begin with? That's what Game Pass is in terms of video games. Helldivers 2, for example, was sold for $50 Canadian. It was not day one on PlayStation Plus or anything. The game had to be fun to play and great in order to cultivate a fan base and bring in revenue. Because if it wasn't, the very real alternative could come to light and Helldivers' studio would just shut down and die. I guarantee you if Helldivers 2 existed within the confines of Game Pass and Arrowhead knew their game was not going to be made for sales and units sold didn't matter, the game would be worse for it because there's no incentive to pour your all into a product otherwise. Like I've said so many times, which I've gotten so much pushback for saying over the years, but I stand by it and unfortunately I get proven right time and again, which is that Xbox Game Pass has killed the quality of video games and there's no denying that now. Sure, you could argue and say, well, Game Pass has saved me money and I get to play games, true, yes, but how many of those games, especially newer ones, were genuinely amazing? And how much of what you're given every month is just slop that you never play? Exactly. The model seems amazing on paper, but it's terrible in practice. Even now, Microsoft is apparently discussing internally if they should make Call of Duty a day one Game Pass title, and I know there's some of you who would think that's amazing, but trust me, you don't want that. Why not, you ask? Because COD's quality has not been the best these past couple of years already. Now put the game into a model where the quality does not matter whatsoever like Game Pass, and you'd end up with yearly COD sequels that are even more lazy and shitty than ever before. The fear of failure is needed when it comes to the allure of success. It's kind of like dying. You and I work to ensure that we don't die, right? You go to a job, you pay taxes, you eat food, exercise, possibly, all of that. You do these things so you don't end up a shriveled up corpse who dies. The fear of dying, the fear of homelessness is what drives you to maintain your life, to keep you being a productive member of society. Xbox Game Pass, in a sense, is like a woke communist student. They offer nothing of value, they're just lazy, they smell bad, they don't try because the government gives them food stamps and a monthly check of welfare instead. They have no reason to try because they believe it's the government's job to keep them going. So they eventually have kids with other commie lazy people, and then those kids are raised into welfare systems, and then they're told to not work or try anything because daddy government will take care of them too. Now take all of those people, multiply them by each family, and you end up with an entire system of lazy people leeching off of the tax dollars of actual hardworking people, because they have no reason to go out and actually make something out of themselves. That's Xbox Game Pass basically, and the ones of you who work, you're basically a PlayStation, Nintendo, or PC gamer, because you actually go and buy your games and support stuff. Well, unless you sail the high seas as a pirate, then I guess you're neither. You know who you are. But the point is that what Xbox has fostered here over the years is turning video games as not only an industry but as an art form into a welfare entertainment system. A convoluted network of barely passable titles being released in order to waste people's time and justify a renewal cycle when it comes to billing. The games aren't great because the price isn't high either. Sure, you get stuff to play every month, but nothing you get is going to compare to premium titles like Final Fantasy XVI or Stellar Blade. Stellar Blade, for example, is great because developer ShiftUp had to make a great game to justify its price tag. Otherwise, nobody would buy it and they would go tits up, but when you read articles about Xbox not being done with their cuts, it makes total sense. Because they're incompetent and they've created and cultivated a culture of mediocrity and laziness. Even Legacy Killer HD tweeted this, and I mean, come on, look at these articles which say stuff like back in 2022. State of Decay 3 report details troubled development and alleged failures at Studio Undead Labs. Here's another, also from 2022, which reads, Fable development is slow due to Playground's inexperience with RPGs, says former designer. Since its announcement in 2020, the upcoming Fable reboot hasn't had much in terms of updates, and one former designer may have the reason why. I mean, come on, it keeps getting worse. This was from a few days ago. Xbox's Perfect Dark reboot still in very rough state, claims Insider. And another from 2021. Everwild was reportedly an action-adventure with god game elements, but it's been rebooted. Don't expect Rare's gorgeous new IP to launch anytime soon. That was 3 years ago and we've heard nothing since. All of these are games managed and funded by Microsoft, yet they have nothing to show for it. Just empty promises and diminishing online services that consistently release slop for the most part. This is not a model that can continue to exist because not only is it too expensive to maintain, but it's literally killing the video game industry as a medium. If you want my honest opinion, if you are primarily on Xbox, please leave the ecosystem altogether. At the very least, invest in a PC instead. Just please don't let yourself be left within the confines of the Xbox ecosystem only. If this news and the myriad of bad broken promises weren't enough to break you, I really don't know what else will. Xbox is a dying platform, just move on already. Finally, I just want to cover this other story about an insane person who wants people like Grums and others dead. From that Park Place, we have this article titled Magic the Gathering and Warhammer artist Paul Scott Canavan says he wants to track down and string up loved ones of people he disagrees with. In case you don't know, Alyssa Mercanti, that Kotaku journalist, tracked down a YouTuber named Smash JT and sent his wife messages about what her husband does on YouTube. Apparently, he's been saying weird stuff or talking about Kotaku on his channel and advocates for their website to fail and be shut down. Mercanti then targeted this guy's wife, and then this Warhammer DnD artist guy responded by saying, "This is absolutely the play. We should be doing this with all of these weird creeps. Track down their significant others and mothers and string them up." This Paul Scott Canavan guy has me blocked already, even though I've never interacted once with him. But anyway, Umbrella Guy asked him, why would a dude who works in games say stuff like this, to which he then replied, "I think you may have misunderstood. The conversation was about holding people accountable for their attacks on the internet. I don't think it's a super controversial take." Grums then got a hold of this and spreaded the word, and now we're here. Paul has since tried to retract his statements, realizing his moronic statements could put the game company he works at in jeopardy, but it's too late now. Studio Grimoire and your game Pale Tides are now going to be known to be employing a guy who openly hates the audience for having different opinions than him. He even tried to play damage control where he said, "Sending a hate mob after me seems a little unkind considering I was just agreeing that people who attack others on the internet should be held accountable. I admit I phrased it poorly, but also it wasn't a statement, it was a reply to a tweet." Ah, of course. Now he's playing the victim card. As per usual, social justice weirdos project and attempt to make you seem like the bad guy once they realize that they're losing. It's a classic tactic they always do, but we're onto them and we don't believe them for even a second. If it isn't corporations being morons and ruining everything that they touch, or sweet baby consulting agencies burning respected studios to the ground, we also have to deal with people like Paul who openly hates the very people who keep his lights on. So good luck with your game, Paul. You're going to need it. Anyway, what do you think about all of this? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks to my patrons and have a wonderful day. Subscribe, share, and like the video, and take care of yourselves. Question everything, vote with your wallets, and I'll see you in the next one.